Charlie Chaplin holds the distinction of being one of the most discussed figures in history. Most all of his films, unlike many of his contemporaries, have survived thanks to his immense popularity and the fact that thousands of copies were made and kept in circulation. This means that even if the original prints were lost, destroyed, or deteriorated, newer copies were always around, even if the quality suffered as bootlegs. While we're lucky that Charlie's films came out virtually unscathed, there still remains a few mysteries in his filmography that linger, driving collectors and historians scrambling to pick up the pieces over 100 years later. During the 1930s and 40s, studios often viewed their silent era films as wasted space and threw them away to make room in their archives. Even masterpieces such as The Lost World and The Phantom of the Opera from 1925 were thought to have no value for future generations and usually recycled for their silver content. Studio fires often destroyed many archives as well, as nitrate film is highly flammable. Some theaters were even instructed to dispose of prints once they had finished showing them, as the studio saw no value in having the films sent back to them to save. The documentary Dawson City: Frozen Time is a perfect example that shows many films were simply buried underground when theaters were finished with them. Or in this case, buried in an underground pool. It wasn't until the 1960s that archivists started turning their attention to silent films as cultural artifacts and began the desperate attempts to save what had survived. There were a few of Chaplin's early Keystone films that, for a time, were considered lost until sole copies were found in the late 60s and 70s. Some of these films include Cruel, Cruel Love, A Busy Day, and Mabel's Strange Predicament. Decades later, in 2010, A Thief Catcher, which features a cameo by Charlie as a Keystone cop, surfaced, the only time he has ever appeared in that fashion. Chaplin mentions this, that he did indeed appear as a Keystone cop. But since no record of this film existed at that time, it was dismissed as faulty memory by many. Wow, Charlie sure showed us up. For years, there's only been one film that continues to be labeled as a lost Chaplin Keystone, called Her Friend the Bandit. As of this video, nothing has ever turned up, although some believe Charlie wasn't even in it, and it was simply a filmography error. That idea seems to be proven false, though, by this newspaper article from Fairbanks, Alaska, which promotes Charlie as the star. This article from August 1916, a full 2 years after it would have been originally released, but perhaps it took that long for a print to be delivered to Alaska. That brings us to these mysterious 3 images. These 3 film grabs show Charlie, out of costume, Mabel Normand as a secretary at a switchboard, and an unidentified man crowded together in an office waiting room. These shots do not match up to any surviving Chaplin film. So what are they, and just where did they come from? According to Brent Walker, author of Max Sennett's Fun Factory, these shots were from a now lost film entitled How Motion Pictures Are Made, produced in December of 1913, released by Keystone, but mainly shot at Thomas Ince's studio with some segments filmed at Sennett's studio. If this is true, then these frames are all that are left of Charlie Chaplin's first screen appearance, predating Making a Living, shot the next month, January of 1914. It does make sense though, as Charlie arrived from Butte, Montana to work at the studio in December 1913. What a shame this film did not survive. Outside of being possibly the earliest appearance by Chaplin on the screen, it was also an amazing behind-the-scenes peek into the early days of movie making in California. That would make it a historical find for a multitude of reasons. A few months later, Charlie did star in a one-reeler called A Film Johnny, which is essentially a behind-the-scenes look at Keystone, through the eyes of the tramp, who mischievously sneaks onto the lot to woo his favorite female movie star. While it is a fact that how motion pictures are made is currently lost, who knows what could turn up as new discoveries are being made all over the world, even a century later. Just as a thief catcher ended up being found, mislabeled at a flea market, this film too could also be found sitting in plain sight, or in the hands of a collector who isn't even aware of its rarity. Until then, we'll have to be patient and enjoy these stills, allowing our imagination to fill in the gaps until the real thing is hopefully unearthed. My hope is that this video can keep these images fresh in the minds of collectors and fans, in a rare chance they happen to come across the print, sitting, of course, in the clearance bin of a local thrift store. I'm Nigel Dreiner, and thank you for watching.